Hello and welcome to the AA Ireland podcast. I'm Paddy Comyn.
And I'm Anna Cullen.
Today we're going to be discussing your vehicle's tyres and keeping safe on the road. We know few of us pay proper attention to our tyres, but it is vital they're in good condition to protect you and your passengers.
Thinking of renewing or shopping around for car insurance to get the best deal? Did you know AA Car Insurance is tailored cover for you? AA members get fully comprehensive car insurance. With your policy, you can drive your own car as well as other cars with the best level of cover. Terms and conditions apply. To find out more, go to the AA.ie. AA Ireland Limited, trading as AA Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
To find out more about tyre safety, I spoke with Colm Conyngham, who is Marketing and Public Relations Manager for Bridgestone Tyres in Ireland. So let's have a listen. So we're joined this week by Colm Conyngham, who's Marketing and Public Relations Manager for Bridgestone Tyres, and of course is a good Drogheda man. How are you, Colm?
Not too bad, Paddy. Yeah, just came up through the traffic there this morning.
Well, listen, thanks for joining us. But before we start, I'd love to know a little bit about yourself and your history in this industry. I've known you personally for a long time, but you've been around the car industry for a number of years, right?
Yeah, I started my career with someone, the late Ken Ryan, that some people will remember, but Ken did the PR for brands like Dunlop, the Mondello racetrack, and so on. So that was my first job in sort of automotive PR. And then I moved to another PR company, Grayling PR, and they had SIMI account at the time. They also had Mazda division, which had just been created within MD Motor Distributors. So Mazda was creating a dealer network and had really exciting new products like, I don't know if you remember, the 323 with the pop-up lights.
Yes.
Yeah.
The hairdresser's Porsche.
That's the one. That's the one. So I was lucky general in that way. I got involved in doing the PR for Mazda in the early days, and it was a pleasure. The Mazda MX-5 came shortly after that. Rotary engined RX-7.
Yeah.
So we had some really exciting cars from a PR perspective, and then some really solid products. 626, when they brought that in, was regarded as a very good
first car.
Yeah,
first car that I actually inherited it.
Yeah,
it came down through the ranks in the family. But a 1991 Mazda 626 was my first car. Tell us a little bit about that time, insofar as what was the world of automotive PR like?
Yeah, it was certainly different, but it was still, Ireland is a small place and it was about personal contacts, We probably had a little more freedom to, party and so on.
Yes.
But no, there was a really good press corps at the time, people that had a great understanding of the cars and were passionate about them. Your own dad included.
Yes. Pat.
Pat, yeah. And no, it was an exciting time in the sense that I think it's hard to say there was more new technology than there is now, but there were some moves forward, like the diesel engine, for example, was becoming much more prevalent.
Right.
So that was something exciting. Mazda at the time had a cross between a turbocharger and a supercharger on a diesel engine called a Comprex diesel.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of exciting things happening. Also, Mazda had, would you believe, one of the first companies at that time looking into hydrogen cars way back then,
And we're not there yet.
Yeah. So, no, it was an exciting time, I think, in the automobile industry. And a product launch typically was a big, lavish affair. There were big budgets. Yeah, it was typically the 80s into the early 90s. The good times were rolling,
I do remember my dad going to Florida for a number of days for the launch of a Fiat Uno, which was a car that Fiat actually didn't sell cars in America at the time, but they managed to launch the car in Florida for several days. But that was the nature of the beast at the time. But look, in Ireland, you're known very much for your work with Bridgestone Tyres. I know you wouldn't call it yourself, but you are Mr. Bridgestone to a lot of people in Ireland. How long have you been with the company?
I started with Bridgestone in 1995, but I was associated with them since 1990. So they were a client of mine along with Mazda from the 90s, early 90s. But I eventually joined the company in 95 and I'm still with them today. But before that, I had a couple of involvements with tyre companies and sort of got an interest. So I was still quite young, in my early 20s, when I met a gentleman called Des Collins, who was setting up Bridgestone in Ireland. He was kind of impressed that I knew about tyres. There wasn't so many young people who'd got an interest in tyres. But from motorsport, interest in cars, I always saw tyres as being really a vital part of them,
Well, look, that's the reason we have invited you on today, because this discussion is all about tyres, and we know that people don't necessarily pay as much attention to tyres as they should. I certainly do, and probably because of your influence. But look, let's start at the very, very basics. Let's not assume any knowledge from anyone. What should people consider at the very outset when it comes to tyres?
Yeah, I mean, the recommendation I make is that you spend as much as you can afford on tyres. Realise that there are different sort of budgets, but it's so important that it shouldn't be the area that you skimp on, that you try and make a saving on, because, they are doing an incredible job. The round and black cliche is what we hear in our industry, but that couldn't be further from the truth at the moment, because as a piece of engineering, they're doing all kinds of different jobs simultaneously, transferring the power to the road, keeping you in a straight line, dynamically moving when you go left to right in an emergency situation, trying to dissipate energy. All of this while still trying to be quieter on the road now than they used to be, by offering lower rolling resistance now, and so on. So there's a complexity of engineering there, and also the consumer wants them to last forever if they could. So all of those complex things are built into the tyres, and good engineering at Bridgestone, we're constantly researching and developing our products. That does cost money, so you will get a good product if you pay the money. I fully understand that.
But expand on that, Colm. Like, for people who might think, well, sure, look, a tyre is a tyre. How could you simply explain the differences between a good tyre, premium tyre, and one that's not so premium?
Yeah, well, if you take the development in cars over the last, say 10 or 15 years, so you can see it's much easier to see the difference there.
Yeah.
So, for example, they're heavier. The demands on those vehicles, the power in those vehicles has increased. So Bridgestone and other major tyre companies will work with the vehicle manufacturers to modify product to suit the new dynamics of the vehicle.
Okay.
I'm not one to put down other products. That's not what I'm here to do.
Yeah, of course.
But we would be, first and foremost, we would be at the forefront of working closely with the vehicle manufacturers. Any vehicle has a geometry. It's highly sort of researched to get that geometry correct. The tyres are part of that geometry. And if you're buying a tyre that from a company who's worked with the vehicle manufacturers, you've a much better chance of that being dynamically correct when you need it to, particularly in an emergency situation,
So when you say, sorry, Colm, when the tyres are, developed with the manufacturer, could you tell us what stage that happens? Is it at the very end, or is it along the journey, do you know?
It's along the journey. It's along the development journey. It's probably somewhere in the middle,
Okay.
In every continent we have a test track and a research and development centre. So south of Rome, we have a research facility that all of the major European vehicle manufacturers are visiting from time to time. We have, some people might remember, Stefano Modena is our chief test driver, a former Formula One driver.
I have driven with that man.
Yeah, and his job is not all excitement. A lot of days it's simply continuously doing laps, accumulating data. Nowadays we use supercomputers to simulate endless prototypes. Some smaller tyre companies, budget tyre companies, are unlikely to have all of those facilities. I'm not saying that there's specifically anything wrong with their products, but the product you get from us and from companies that are equivalent to us will be highly developed along with the vehicle manufacturers. That's becoming more important even more important as the current range of vehicles are being developed.
Tell us a little bit about the sort of legalities. What's the legal tyre tread depth, and is that a good yardstick?
Yeah, I think the 1.6 millimeters is the minimum legal that you must have, and that should be across the majority of the tread of your tyre. So that's an internationally agreed figure, but it is the absolute minimum.
There shouldn't be a target.
No, it shouldn't be a target. We would say to people, but nonetheless, consumers need to get value from their tyres as well. So we don't want to be recommending that they change them too early. So we're confident in our product, and I know some of the other manufacturers would agree that what I would say to people anyway, personally, is to replace them before they get to 1.6 millimeters. So we're looking at maybe 2 millimeters, to me, would be the best recommendation in that territory.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know it's very hard to sort of guess how long that takes because there's so many other factors involved. But is there a very rough guess as to how long in terms of kilometres that takes?
Driving styles,
yeah, of course,
keeping your pressures correct, all of that has an impact. But I think an average run out of your average tyre is 35 to 40,000 kilometres.
Right,
you know.
Okay.
Now, regularly I get 50,000 kilometres no matter what car I have or what Bridgestone application I have, but that's from maintenance, driving style and so on. You know, I would like to think I know what I'm doing, but most motorists can achieve higher mileages if they look after their tyres on a regular basis. So that would be checking the pressures fortnightly, I would suggest, and don't ignore your tyre pressure monitoring system on the dashboard. Always see to your tyres. That would certainly help the tyre life. Spinning the wheels from the lights, I don't think anyone needs to be told that performance driving, and some tyres obviously are manufactured for performance cars. The grip in terms of high performance motoring is slightly different. The compounds might be softer and that might reduce in some cases. So
should you move your tyres around? And I know it might be one of the sort of in the myth section, but if you drive a BMW that's rear wheel drive or you drive a Volkswagen that's front wheel drive, are the front and rear tyres going to wear quicker than the
typically the driven wheels will wear quicker. So there is a process of rotation, which most motor dealers and independent tyre dealers will all be well aware of. So that is good practice, but it's not the number one thing that's going to make your tyres last longer, but it is part of good maintenance. So if you're visiting for service or getting new tyres, or even just bringing your car in for a check, you could ask for the tyres to be rotated.
And would this happen habitually by a main dealer? And I suppose the reason I ask the question is, the likes of Bridgestone will be experts in that subject. Okay, so if you go to a Bridgestone outlet, they will know exactly that. How is the level of understanding within the average car dealer about tyre tech, do you think?
I think it's like anything in the world. There are variances, We obviously in the tyre industry would always like to see more attention paid to the tyres. And I think one connection now, which I think will make that more important, is sustainability and the idea of sustainability. So running out your tyres 20% early is not something we want in the current day. So everything we can do to make our tyres last longer is not just for our own pocket, which you think would be the primary motivation for most people, but also from a sustainability. So from the industry, we would encourage all interventions, including rotation where appropriate. It doesn't always work where there can be different replacement requirements. So say, for example, a single tyre puncture and so on. But generally speaking, there is an opportunity to rotate the tyres. And
I was asking you off air about my own car, where I have 2 Bridgestone tyres on one side, and then when I got them, I had some punctures recently and I got them replaced with another brand. There's 2 now of one brand on one side and 2 on another. Does that make a difference necessarily? Does that not necessarily?
They're probably the correct size, and so in terms of NCT and things like that, you're not breaking any laws. But the best practice recommendation is always to have identical tyres on the same axle, and I would certainly go so far as to say I would have the same brand on each axle. In an ideal world, that's the way. That is the best practice recommendation.
Just come back to the tread depth again. I know we talked about the limits, and you said 2 millimeters is probably a little bit better practice. What does that translate to in terms of safety? First of all, if you are at the minimum tread depth or 2 millimeters, how does that compare to, say, a new Bridgestone tyre in terms of braking distances and things like that? Can you quantify that?
In the older tyre technology, that's why there may be a difference between, say, the brands lower down the food chain. Our technology now the curve of degradation isn't just as straightforward as it used to be. In other words, the less tread, the greater the stopping distance.
Right, okay.
But there is obviously a level of connection there. But we want the consumer to get value for money, so we're engineering tyres that certainly up to 3 and 2 millimeters for normal driving. And if you're in wet weather, I mean, that's largely speaking what the tread depth is for entirely, in fact, is in wet weather, So
what does tread do? A very simple question.
The tread is there for a single purpose, really, is to divert water that's on the road. Because if you don't do that, it will lift up the car. You will lose your contact patch over a certain speed.
And that's aquaplaning.
Aquaplaning, exactly. If you need to brake in an emergency situation or change direction, you'll have less control in that case. It has all kinds of negatives if we don't evacuate the water. So Formula One is a really good thing you can see, and Bridgestone had 13 years involved with Formula One, and Michael Schumacher, the rain meister, used to perform on our tyres. But we used to see where they had the slick tyres on and suddenly there was a downpour of rain and the vehicles became instantly uncontrollable. So, they put on the treaded tyres, the wet tyres, and regained that control. So what happened there was the tread pattern is evacuating the water and giving you a contact patch, which, like we talked at the beginning of this interview about the importance of tyres. To start with, the contact patch is quite small for any vehicle, for the size of the vehicle,
And for 2 ton of vehicles, as some of the EVs are now.
Yeah. So it's not a whole lot bigger than your hand, When the rain comes along, you're going to lose even more of that getting between you and the road. So you want to evacuate that water. So that's the key point. But obviously, engineering now, we add things like that, which came from Formula One. We add silica to our tyres, and that's by a chemical process. We're allowing more heat to be kept in the tyre and other improvements in performance, which means that even with less tread than, say, a brand new tyre, we still have other means of making the tyre perform well in the wet.
And is that a technology that came down from Formula One?
Yeah, that was first used by the likes of Michael Schumacher of Ferrari and others. Is now in just about all of the top brand tyre products. It's widely used. But Bridgestone were pioneers in that,
So it's great to see that obviously this technology has developed, that the tyres will perform to a better level of ability over the length of their tyre now. But at the other side of that, and not so much Bridgestone, but tyres in general, what are the dangers for people if they do sort of put it on the long finger, leave it, and then are driving their car at either the legal depth or worse? Are there implications in terms of safety for them?
Absolutely. I mean, the stopping distance will dramatically increase. And if you go online, or you will hear, there's lots of different
analogies,
distances.
Football fields and stuff.
And the weight and the speed has a lot to do with that. But nonetheless, if you're in an emergency situation, you're certainly talking about, with ball tyres in the wet, several car lengths more than you want to stop.
You want as few as possible. Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, if you go across the M50 on a wet evening, as I do regularly, or on the M1 heading north, it is quite incredible to see people tailgating in the wet. Even with good tyres, that's not recommended. But the suspicion is, if we look at the NCT failures, that some of those people have not got great tyres. So they really have no chance of stopping in an emergency situation. Tyres in good condition, well maintained, with the correct pressures. Don't forget that even a tyre with lots of tread on it, if it's underinflated or overinflated, underinflation would be the more common, is not going to perform dynamically as required, because the contact patch shape is distorted. So
it's funny with the thing with inflation and underinflation, and something that personally I only really started paying attention to a few years ago. But I don't think a lot of people, and I've no evidence to back this up, really pay that much attention to it. How often should you check?
I would certainly say fortnightly. Again, the benefits are so good that it seems crazy not to. If everybody on the planet had the correct tyre pressures, there would be a percentage saving in terms of CO2 into the atmosphere. Wow. So let's take that for starters. And we really need that at the moment. So it's probably one of the simplest things you can do to make a contribution. I don't know about you, but giving up red meat and some of these things they're requiring us to do, I'm going to find tough enough. I'm prepared to make some contribution to all of these things. But how easy is it to just go out and check your tread depths and your pressures every couple of weeks? But a month, look, if we said to people, do it monthly, that would certainly make a difference. But anecdotally, we hear of people who maybe have have literally never checked their tyres. If it's when they go to a service outlet or some family member maybe comments on it, but they wouldn't do it themselves.
It really does make a difference. And, it's not a hard thing to do. You will often find the right pressure on the inside of the door of most cars, down at the bottom of the driver's side door, you'll find them.
Yeah, the three places that you can find it, I mean, your owner's handbook will always have it, but usually more conveniently than that, it will be somewhere to the right of the driver on the sill. There is a very common place, or inside the fuel filler cap is another place that some manufacturers put them. So, but once if you find it once, even write it down and put it somewhere even more convenient to you if it's not immediately available. But the ones on the last few cars I've had, it's been immediately beside the driver, so it's very easy to use. But yeah, so you prolong the life of your tyre, you use less fuel.
Well, I'm going to stop you there, Colm, because look, obviously fuel prices are huge news at the moment, and we've habitually started to see prices are in around the €2 mark. A really useful tip in saving fuel is the correct inflation, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's no more difficult than that, because
why is that though?
Your rolling resistance.
Okay,
it's to do
what
with
does that
rolling
mean?
Resistance. Well, as the vehicle rolls along, there's a forces against it. So
you're fighting physics.
Yeah, you're actually putting an obstacle in the way of the vehicle moving forward. It needs more energy to move forward.
Okay.
So by having it at the correct pressure, as designed by the tyre manufacturer, the vehicle manufacturer, then the car will move forward more easily. So
it's taking less energy to move the car forward.
Absolutely, yeah. As I said to you at the start as well, every vehicle is a mathematical equation in terms of its steering geometry, its suspension setup, and the tracking of the car. And the tyres are part of that mathematics, and the inflation pressure, the size of the tyre, inflation pressure, all of that has been worked out by engineers. And by
smarter people than us.
Yeah,
exactly.
So when you interfere with that, you've upset the whole mathematics of the vehicle to run as it was designed, So why people do that is beyond me. It's not a very difficult thing. So you will prolong the life of the tyre, save fuel, reduce your rolling resistance, and be good to the environment as well. So
and look, it is a simple thing to do. A lot of those outlets now, how you can just key in the pressure you put in your euro or whatever it is, and it'll beep when the pressure stops, right? It's simple.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not difficult, and it's something that's worth. If you're a bit unsure about it, ask somebody, family member who's confident or friend. Once you've done it once or twice, it's not.
And set a reminder on your phone or something to do it every 2 weeks.
Yes,
because
indeed.
look, anything that can save people money on fuel at the moment, and it's a decent percentage of saving.
The final point on tyre pressures is, so you're on the M50, it's raining, you've maybe accidentally got a bit too close to the vehicle in front of you, something in front happens, there's an emergency situation, you jam on the brakes with your half inflated tyres or 10 or 20% below what it should be. Again, you're operating with a hand tied behind your back. Yeah. So you're going to take longer to stop. Your control of the vehicle will be more difficult. So another really significant benefit,
Tell us a little bit about how Bridgestone tyre technology has developed over the years since you're dealing with Bridgestone. Have you seen much of a change over the years?
Yeah, I mean, again, people find them very boring because they look the same, you know. And the first time I went to our research centre in Rome, they had this kind of like a funny shape on a graph which had lots of different arrows coming out of it. So basically what they were, and if you look closely, it said longevity of the tyre, stopping distance was on another arrow, and so on, So there was lots of parameters. Noise reduction is one that they're concerned about. Rolling resistance came along after that. So all of these things they were trying to improve on then. Guess what? They're still trying to push all of these out.
Okay.
But as I said, going back to Formula One, if you want to reduce rolling resistance, well, that's a slick tyre, but it won't stop in the wet. So by the time you're trying to make a tyre on the road, you're trying to improve all the parameters and not affect one of the other ones. So that is the engineering problem. So it's not that anything has changed in terms of what they're setting out to do, but they're trying to use more engineering. That can be materials technology. It can be we're one of the few companies that operates the Cray supercomputers so we don't have to make in the past, when I joined the company first, we would have made, say, real prototypes after prototype after prototype and test them and get the data feedback. Nowadays, before we even go and make a single prototype, we will run a million different permutations of the tyre and then make a prototype. So again, more environmentally friendly, but also it means in engineering terms you can make the dynamics of the tyre much better, because you can figure out how do I reduce rolling resistance without making it stop or take longer to stop in the wet, or without perhaps reducing the longevity of the tyre. So that is, it's not so much that we're trying to do anything different. I suppose the big difference in product terms at the moment is for EVs.
Oh yeah, it was my next question. It's about about electric vehicles. So what role do the tyres play in things like range and I've seen certainly in press releases you put out about specific tyres being developed for specific vehicles.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, Bridgestone has worked with people like, so the i3, BMW i3 would be a good example, where we made a specific tyre for that vehicle. And if you look at it, it's very unusual in that it's got narrow and much narrower tyre, a taller sidewall, so quite different than the trend that we had seen with low profile tyres developing for internal combustion engine cars over the years. And the reasons for that, the design, again, working with the vehicle manufacturers, we now have a heavier vehicle in many cases compared to equivalent type sort of family car, say, if you were to take that. It's much heavier, the batteries, and it also needs to have lower rolling resistance is the obvious one, because from the range anxiety point of view, again, if you don't have low rolling resistance tyres, like we said earlier, and you're going to take more energy to go the same distance, so you want to have as little energy as possible. And therefore, also, to re-emphasise, make sure your pressures are even more important on an EV to have your pressures correct.
Funny, something must have changed, because I remember when Volkswagen launched the first e-Golf,
yes,
the wheels that they put on the car, they said you cannot change these wheels, and you need to leave these on. These are the size of wheels and tyres. Now with the EVs that are coming out, we're seeing 19s, 20-inch wheels, and it doesn't seem to have been so serious. There must have been a development in the technology to improve over the last even 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, again, they would have been working with the geometry of the particular vehicle and the dynamics of a particular vehicle to develop it. But the key parameters are still there. Aerodynamics is one point that comes in, which wouldn't have been that significant before. Weight, as I said already, low rolling resistance. So yes, we probably now have the ability to develop those products for, say, for example, high performance cars, as we're seeing some incredible vehicles coming under the EV banner. So yes.
Will EVs wear tyres any differently or any more or less than standard ICE cars?
No, that's something that we have in the ordinary road-going vehicles for family motorists. It shouldn't. We have engineered into our products that they will last an equivalent amount of time. But there are some caveats with that I personally think that the driving style required for the EV can be a little bit different if you want to be easy on the tyres. They've a lot of torque, and if people are putting that torque down regularly, and that may affect the lifespan of the tyres. I mean, a friend of mine who the first thing he wanted to show me when he got his new EV was how quickly it could accelerate, Yeah, exactly. Now, I don't know how many demonstrations he did of that, but that is a sure way to...
because the torque is instant. It's not like it builds up. You get all of the available torque right there and then.
Yes, So I can't speak for everyone's driving style in an EV, but it strikes me that it might be necessary for people just to be aware, and probably over time they will adapt their driving style, and that will ensure they get similar mileage from the tyres. But again, the maintenance of the tyres is absolutely crucial from a range anxiety point of view, number one,
So Colm, I suppose, look, in summary, are there any myths that people should really, you can dispel about tyres that people maybe don't understand, or any hints or tips that people should come away with in relation to thinking about tyres?
Yeah, I don't think there's any great sort of old wives' tales about tyres. I haven't come across them anyway. But it's very, very basic. in what the motorist has to do. But even though their job is the motorist's job is basic in terms of maintenance, I couldn't overemphasize the importance of the tyres, particularly when it comes to the day where they need to stop suddenly or to take an avoiding action. That's when they will really need to have spent the most money they can afford on tyres and have maintained their tyres well. And finally, when they get their monthly bill for fuel, or for when they're examining their monthly bill for fuel or for electricity as it now is, that the maintenance of their tyres will has an impact on that. And now more than ever, whether you're EV or the internal combustion engine version of motor vehicles, it affects both. So if that isn't good enough reason to be concerned about your tyres, I don't know what is, you know.
So Colm, thanks for joining us today, and join us next time on the AA Ireland podcast.
Well, Paddy, that's great information there from Colm, especially how tyre pressures affect fuel economy, given record fuel prices, as we know. So, as always, if you want to read more on this topic, go to the AA blog, www.theaa.ie/blog, and you will, of course, find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok.
Please subscribe to the podcast, and until next time, goodbye and be safe.